I think people don't spend nearly enough time, if any at all, thinking about what they really want to do with their lives. Most of us have this path laid out before us throughout our lives. We have to go to school, for instance. In America anyway, you've got to go through high school. And then if your parents are wealthy, they're going to send you to college. And then what? You're going to come out of college with a job, and you're going to need a car and a house or an apartment. You got to have health insurance, right? You got to have a career. You got to have a 401k, a retirement plan. What are you going to do when you retire? And then at the same time, you're falling in love. You're young. And next thing you know, you got a family. You don't have to have kids. Don't have to get married if you don't want to get married. Don't have to have a house and a car. Don't have to have a career job. Don't have to live in America.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. Have you ever asked someone how they're doing and they tell you they are, quote, living the dream? It's typically delivered with sarcastic undertones, but it got me thinking about how different my life would be if I took the time to design it with intention rather than simply going through the motions. My conversation today is with Paul Trammell. Paul has lived a big life and is truly living his dream with intention. He's gone through many journeys so far, from a career as a musician, then a commitment to sobriety, followed by selling all of his possessions on land to live on a sailboat where he currently travels the world, surfs big waves, and writes novels. Sound unreal? Well, that's just the way he likes it. This episode got me all fired up, and I hope that happens for you too. So let's jump in. Paul Trammell, thank you so much for being here today on A Joyful Rebellion.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You've been through a lot of different transitions, and the reason I wanted to talk to you is because one of the ways that you decided to move forward is something that a lot of people probably dream about and never end up doing, and you actually went out and did it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to start at the beginning. You were a teenager, you had dreams, aspirations, you followed that until it didn't work for you anymore. Can you walk us through what got you up to that point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, if we're starting with teenager, I initially thought I was going to be a doctor like my father. And then about the time I got to college, well, right then, it was probably like the first week of college, I realized that the pre-med students were much more studious than I was, much more serious about school. And I wanted to go surfing and have a good time. And then I started thinking about what my father really did and how much he worked. And it just kind of hit me real quick, like, that's not what I want to do. That's not the life I want. Because that's all a surgeon does is work. They don't have time for anything else. That's why doctors play golf. It's like the only thing they can possibly have time to do. They can, get out there and play for a couple hours once in a while, but they're not going on vacations. He's getting called in the middle of the night to go to work all the time.
Wow.
Someone else's surgery is going bad, and you wake up at 3 a.m. and you got to drive to the hospital and get elbow deep into somebody's guts and try to save them like that. That happens all the time to him. Or it did.
Wow.
So that was the first big change. Okay, I'm not going to be a doctor. And then I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but and I went all the way through getting a master's degree in biology just because I was in school and I was doing all right, and that was all. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. Eventually, I decided I wanted to be a musician, and for probably 20 years I was. That eventually after 20 years of doing it, of being a gigging, musician, writing music, playing it in bands, that came to a place where I knew it wasn't going to get any bigger. I knew the band I was in had reached as far as it was going to go. And I also quit drinking and quit smoking weed at the same time. I was in a reggae band, so it just wasn't as fun anymore. And I realized I need to do something different. And right about when I quit drinking, I also realized after about a year, I realized I wanted adventure. I wanted big adventure in my life. That was what was missing, outdoor adventure, because that was something that was a big part of my life. It was kind of dwindling. And I thought, I just want to go really big. I was trying to think of what's the biggest adventure I can find. And the biggest local thing I found was a 5-day solo canoe trip through the Okefenokee Swamp, which still to this day is one of the scariest things I've ever done because there's so many alligators out there.
Oh,
hundreds. Like you see them one after another all day long, and you're like completely in wilderness with no communication, sleeping on these platforms that the gators can crawl up on if they want to. It was really cool. It was kind of terrifying too a lot of the time.
that sounds like it.
Because I'm scared of alligators. I have like this deep fear of them.
Yeah, you got what sounds like a normal human reaction to
Yes, it is a normal human
huge
reaction.
reptile.
It's a big reptile that will eat you if you fall in
Yeah.
the water. It's not like they might eat you. They will, because they eat deer and pigs. They eat things that are human-like. They're not intelligent to think like, nah, that's a human. They're dangerous. I shouldn't eat them. No, they're not like that at all. While I was out there, I realized sailing was really it.
Okay.
Sailing was what I wanted to do. It hit me real hard and fast. Like, that's it. Because I'd been sailing offshore with my father a few times when I was younger. So I just dove into it head first. And within a year, I owned a boat. And I had taken classes. And I'd been sailing offshore a couple of times with other people. And I bought this boat that was 1,000 miles from home. And I learned how to sail it by myself.
Wow.
And I sailed it home all alone, offshore 1,000 miles. And it was a huge adventure. And I knew it was something, a big, giant adventure, and it was unrepeatable. So I wrote a book while I was doing that, and that's Becoming a Sailor. That's my first sailing book. And that's how it all started. Then a few years later, I'd sold my house and got rid of all my possessions and bought the boat that I'm on right now, which is a little bit bigger than my first one, and sold the other boat and everything. And that was 5 years ago. I've been sailing ever since, sailing and writing. And I'm in Panama right now, living out my dreams. I was surfing this morning, eating fresh fish that a local Indian sold to me yesterday. I'm writing every day. I've totally changed everything about my life. I was a carpenter. For those 20 years that I was a musician, I was making a living as a carpenter.
Okay.
So that's all gone now. Now I'm a writer who lives on a sailboat.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, what a story. The progression is pretty fantastic, because this podcast is all about the time in your life when you realize just something's not working. Then you have to figure out, okay, what comes next? And that's the joyful rebellion part. It's usually something that's going to be pretty unknown to you because it's out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had a couple of those along the way, and everyone does, whether they recognize it or not.
Yeah.
So it sounds like one of the first ones in your formative years was you thought you were going down the path of medical school and you were going to be a doctor, and then you had this aha, like, oh, this isn't going to be it, because these guys work so hard, and I want to have fun, I want to enjoy life, and it doesn't seem like playing golf a couple times a month at the most is going to get that. So then you went through with your college degree, and I'm interested, it sounds like there was a point in that where you had to have your own joyful rebellion with sobriety, and you had to figure that out. What was the impetus for that part? Because it sounds like you did that before you said goodbye to the music business as a whole.
I've quit drinking 3 times in my life. Once was in high school, and that didn't last very long because one of my friends basically put a beer in my hand and yelled at me until I drank it in the back of his car, captive audience, nowhere to go. Then I quit drinking in college, and believe it or not, the same friend,
No way.
did something similar to me again. Like I ran into him.
Oh, man.
I ran into him not in college, but in graduate school. By the way, that same friend is sober now. He saw that I quit, and he quit too.
Oh, nice.
So we're both sober now. So at that point, I set a limit for myself. I'm going to start drinking again. Like when this guy, put a beer in my hand again. I said, okay, I'll try, something different. I'll try to keep it under the wraps. But if I ever get to 12 beers a day again, which is where I was when I quit, that's like a red line. Like if you get there, you have to recognize that you've done it again. You're there again. You have to quit. You can't go through life drinking a 12-pack a day. So many years later, I was drinking a 12-pack a day, and I realized it. So I had it in my head, like, you've got to quit at some point. But I'm in a band. I'm having fun. Like, you drink a lot when you're in a performing band. You perform at bars and at festivals, and, free beer is one of the perks usually. And after parties, touring with the band in a bus with beer and weed, like it's a good time, and it's hard to quit when you're in a band. But anyway, I was at a party, and a friend of mine walked up, or a guy I kind of knew. He wasn't a good friend, but a guy I kind of knew, and he looked really good. Like he had nice clothes on, he was clean cut and just sharp looking, smile on his face, healthy, fit. And I said, hey Jim, you want a beer? Because he didn't have a beer, and I had a cooler of beer right next to me, and he said, no, I quit. So I said, oh, yeah, well, tell me how. Well, why? I'm curious. Like, I want to know how you did it, why you did it. He said, my brother died. His brother was younger than me. He was 40. I was 44, I think. His brother died from drinking too much. And not like just from one night of drinking a bunch of liquor. It was from a lifetime of heavy liquor drinking. His, internal organ failure. Like, it's a long, slow death when you poison yourself like that.
Wow.
The guy's dead.
Yeah.
And something about that very short conversation hit me. And I quit the next day. And that was it.
Wow.
I tried to quit smoking weed a couple of months later, and I couldn't. It was so hard. I couldn't sleep. I mean, I went a whole month without smoking weed and still was going through withdrawal. I still couldn't sleep. Like, I went 4 nights in a row. Can you imagine 4 full nights with no sleep at all?
Whoa, no.
Like, you're going insane at that point. You feel like you're just dying from the mind down, you're like dying head first.
Yeah, wow.
So I started smoking again, and then I tried a year later. I actually went sailing. A year later, I was trying to be a sailor, and I booked a trip with someone I didn't know, a 3-day offshore trip, and I figured I'll quit then. This is an opportunity, I thought.
Right.
I'm going to be on a boat with strangers. I'm going to be offshore. There's probably not going to be any weed on board. These guys probably don't smoke, and I'm going to give it a shot. So I literally smoked a joint on the way to the airport, and that's the last time I've ever smoked weed, that joint on the way to the airport.
Wow.
So finally got, getting out of my home, getting away from all the things that were familiar to me is what made it happen, I think. When you're at home and you know exactly who to call or where to go to get some, or maybe there's some in your house, or you've got, it's very difficult to quit something like that in that kind of environment. So getting away from it really helped. And I don't think I even went through withdrawal that time, but the first time I was going crazy. I was really going through withdrawal, which was surprising because when I was educated about drugs back in the 70s, they said marijuana was not addictive, and that's incorrect. If you look into the medical journals today, they say it is addictive.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt in my mind, because I was going through some various symptoms like insomnia, nausea, but the hardest ones were the insomnia, but also the anger and depression, waves of anger and depression throughout the day. Like, imagine you're so mad at nothing that you want to fight, like you just want to go pick a fight with somebody and start throwing punches.
Yeah.
And then an hour later, you're really depressed. The world is just meaningless, and then you're angry again 2 hours later, and this goes on day after day.
Looking back on it, it sounds like you were, like you said, going into a completely new and novel situation with the sailing trip that you had booked with people you didn't know. And so there was that whole learning curve. Do you feel like you were maybe so focused and maybe a little distracted from what the pace and the schedule and all the things that you'd been used to? Maybe that took over and kind of replaced the withdrawal a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the withdrawal is mental, for sure. I was somewhere that was very interesting and new and exciting. And, even the very first day I was jogging, I was in St. Lucia, in the Caribbean. The guy offered to sell me weed on the first freaking day.
Geez. Yeah.
I just had to be like, no. I was running by. I'm like, no, I don't want any weed. And another guy on the dock was smoking weed. Yeah, the Caribbean, there's plenty of that going on in the Caribbean.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, definitely the new environment, the excitement, the interest. You don't need to enhance the experience when you're out on the ocean sailing. There's no need to try to make it better. Like, drugs make a lot more sense when you're in a ho-hum kind of boring environment.
Right.
A house in a neighborhood. That's not that exciting, I mean, that's kind of an excuse. But yeah, if you're trying to quit, if somebody's listening and they're trying to quit something that's addictive, getting outside of your normal environment is a great way to do it. Now, one of the ways that I'm still sober 9 years later is I left everything. I got on a boat and left. I'm not in that town anymore.
Right. Which is pretty...
that helps.
That's pretty what a lot of people would label it or judge it as, like, that's radical. But it sounds like you weren't necessarily trying to run away from maybe that life or that career. You left it, but it sounds like you were running toward your adventure, like the dreams you had of being out on the ocean. And so I always like to make that distinction. I mean, sometimes we're running away from something, but sometimes we're really in a positive way running towards something, and we just have to leave all the past behind.
Yeah. I mean, change is good. Going through all your life doing the same thing is kind of dull. I think radical life changes are a good thing. And sometimes running away from one thing and running towards something else, it's both, and it's good.
Yeah.
It's all good, I basically spent a lot of time thinking, like, what do I really want to do with the rest of my life? I'm like halfway through it.
Yeah.
And what do I really want to do? What's, and I've always had this dream of being a sailor. This is an old dream. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, was to get out on a boat. And actually, one of my strategies for staying sober was to do things I couldn't do when I was a drunk.
Ah.
So one thing you can't do when you are a drunk is paddle a canoe for 5 days because you can't bring enough beer,
Oh, okay.
Literally, like if you're a liquor drinker, yeah, I could have brought some bottles of liquor, but I was a beer drinker. I literally could not have brought 5 nights worth of, that's 5 12-packs on ice.
Right.
Like that's a whole canoe. What are you going to bring? A second canoe?
That's a lot of planning. Yeah.
So that's how that started. And then as I was out there, I was thinking, I could get into my old dream of sailing, like long distance offshore sailing now, because you can't do that either if you're a drunk. Drunks who have sailboats don't go anywhere. Their boats stay at the marina.
Yeah.
You get offshore and try to pull off a multi-day passage by yourself. You're not drinking. No way. Maybe if you're like a very controlled drinker and you have like 1 beer or something, yeah, people do that. But that's not me. I've never in my life had only 1 beer. Like that's completely impossible.
Yeah.
That was another thing. I thought, like, now I have the opportunity to be an offshore sailor because I don't drink anymore. I spent a lot of time thinking, like, what do I really want to do? I want to sail. I got it into my head, like, I want to sail. And now I got to think about how I'm going to make a living doing it. Well, I'd already written a book about quitting drinking. That was my very first book. And that book was selling. So when I bought the boat and wrote the second book, Becoming a Sailor, that book started selling. Then I did a trip to the Bahamas, a solo sail to the Bahamas, wrote another book called Journey to the Ragged Islands. That book started selling. So now I've got 3 books that are selling. I'm making money, and I thought, well, this is it. I can make a living. So if I sell my house, I'll have enough money to get started, and I'm just going to give it a shot, see if it works. 5 years later, it's working.
Yeah, so I'm curious the timeline from, it sounds like you were 44 when you had that quick conversation with an old friend whose brother passed from alcohol. Then you were phasing out of the music business at that point anyway. What was the timeline? Like, when did you get that first boat? How old were you then? And how many years was it between that first boat and selling your house?
Let's see. Okay, February 2015, I quit drinking. December of that year, I went to the Okefenokee on the canoe trip.
Okay.
Then I took sailing classes early the next year. Then November of 16, I bought my sailboat, my first sailboat. So now I'm 1 year and a half sober, bought a boat.
Okay.
A 30-foot boat for like $7,000 or something, price of a used car. Then it was 2019 that I sold my house.
Okay.
And bought this boat. As soon as I bought this boat, I mean, I sold my house before I bought the boat. So I was kind of homeless for a few months there.
Gotcha.
But I knew I was going to buy a boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, October of 2019, I drove my Suburban with all my belongings from Florida to Massachusetts, bought this boat, moved on to it, sold my truck soon after. I don't have anything on land anymore. Everything I own is on this boat.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been sailing and living aboard ever since.
The reason I asked about the timeline is because when I'm talking with folks who have made a major shift in their way of life, I like to give people that perspective, especially people listening who are thinking, oh gosh, he just up one day and bought a boat, and the next thing you know, he's in Panama. No, you were a year and a half, and then you got the first boat. That was kind of your intro. You'd taken some classes. Yes, this was a dream of yours, but you didn't just jump into it, and you didn't just go and sell your house.
Right.
The question I do have is, when you did decide to get rid of everything you had on land, what was your family, friend reaction to that? Like, what was the temperature?
Yeah, well, my parents know me well enough to know that I am an outdoor, adventurous, risk-taking kind of guy. They accept that, and they're okay with it. They were so happy that I was sober and doing something new and different.
Yeah.
So they were fine with that. I wanted to sell the house and buy a boat right away. And my father is the one who said, you really ought to crew on someone else's boat. You need to take this a little slower. And he was right. So at the time I decided I wanted to be a sailor, I did the following. I took a 1-week sailing class with the American Sailing Association. I read book after book after book about, sailing nonfiction books. I mean, I read 30 in the first year probably, like just one after another. Going through the list on Amazon of sailing nonfiction books, reading them all. Then as soon as my class was done, I booked through crewbay.com. I found a guy who needed crew. in St. Lucia to Puerto Rico. So I flew to St. Lucia, got on his boat, sailed to Puerto Rico. So 3 days offshore. That's important to do something like that, because what if you hate it?
Yeah.
What if you get terribly seasick and you freaking hate it? You don't want to sell your house before you realize that.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to buy a sailboat before you realize that. So I got out there and loved it. Came back to Florida. Another friend of mine asked if I wanted to crew with him to the Bahamas. So I did that. Another shorter offshore trip, but a week in the Bahamas, and I loved it. Then I bought a 30-foot boat, so a small, inexpensive boat that I could learn on and still keep my house. So I had that boat for a couple of years. Then I put that boat up for sale when I realized I was going to sell my house. I thought I would probably keep that boat because sailboats are pretty hard to sell, typically.
Yeah.
So I thought, this will probably be the boat that I keep and live on, but it's kind of small. If I can sell it for enough, I'll sell it. I had her painted and varnished and some new parts. Like, she was beautiful. And this guy came, and it was like very unlikely scenario where the particular old, uncommon boat that I had somehow was his like dream boat from when he was a kid because of some book he read. It's like an obscure French boat, from the 70s.
Oh, wow.
He was like, oh my God, this is my dream boat, my childhood dream boat. And here I had it painted bright red and the varnish work recently done. And I had a new mahogany tiller I had just built and varnished. And he was all smiles. He bought it right away.
Wow.
Boom. So that happened. So yeah, a lot of things happened. Then I went on a long search. I drove all up the East Coast looking at different boats and selected one that was the right match for me. And then I worked on her. I put in a ton of work on this boat. When you buy an old sailboat, like you better be ready to work like all day for a few months.
Yeah.
Literally.
Wow.
So there were probably 10 months total where I worked all day, sun up to sundown, wake up to sleep like all day.
Wow.
For probably 10 months. But now she's a world cruiser. Now I can go anywhere I want.
That's great. What was the feeling you had when you sold your Suburban? Because you had already sold your house. You packed everything you had in there. You loaded all those things up. Describe what it was like trying to decide what stays and what goes on the boat if you're going to get rid of all your worldly possessions on land.
Well, the hardest part was the things in my house. We all have so much stuff.
Yeah.
So I gave away quite a few things. I had multiple garage sales. Going through my room, some stuff's obvious. Like, I'm going to get rid of this. All the furniture obviously has to go, but we've all got drawers and closets and attics and boxes full of stuff. A whole file cabinet of all my taxes for the last 20 years, right into the trash. I'm like, IRS wants to audit me. I'm just going to have to suck it up. I'm not taking this,
Yeah.
But I had all sorts of other things. So I put them in piles. This is a go pile. This is a keep pile. And then I had a whole room in my house which was I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Instead of like just getting stuck, like what am I going to do with this? Am I going to give it away? So I don't know. So I'm just going to put it in the I don't know room and move on.
All right.
Go to the next thing. So I had a whole room of I don't know. It took a whole year to get rid of all the stuff in my house. I had a garage. I was a carpenter. I had a garage full of wood and tools. I had bonfire go on for about 3 days. Literally.
Yeah. Wow.
That was probably the hardest part. By the time it got down to the Suburban, that was the very last thing. It quit running too. Like right at the very end, the water pump blew on it. I didn't know what it was, but all of a sudden, like all the water drained out of the radiator. No. And I'm like, crap, So I put it on Craigslist for $1,000. It was a nice 4-wheel drive Suburban, 05, I think. But I couldn't start it,
Yeah.
Couldn't start it because it's got no water in the radiator. I thought, and it was cold. It had just frozen, so I thought the radiator cracked. I thought probably, here I am from Florida coming up here to Maryland, and winter hit, and I probably don't have the right antifreeze in it, and the radiator probably buzzed. But anyway, a guy came and looked at it, and he goes, $1,000. He goes, why are you selling it so cheap? I'm like, well, it doesn't, you can't even start it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he goes, he looked at it. He goes, it's your water pump. He goes, I'll have that fixed.
Wow.
He's like, $1,000. And I'm like, yeah. He put $1,000 in my hand, and a tow truck came and gone. So that was pretty easy because I needed to get out of there. I was in Maryland in December, and I needed to get south. It was cold as hell.
Yeah.
I was ready to go, and if I didn't sell the Suburban, it was going to be a loose end. Sitting in a parking lot in Maryland while I'm in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So that was pretty easy to get rid of that part, but it was all the stuff in the house was the really difficult part. Yeah, it took a full year to do that.
I love that you say that because, when I talk to guests and they've got these dramatic changes they've made in their lives, it didn't just happen over the course of months. It wasn't like, I had a dream one night and the next day I was sailing in the Bahamas.
No.
It was work. that went into it and a lot of research, and you had a lot of experiences to get you to that point. And when you did get to that point, when you left Maryland and you started heading south, it sounds like it was day after day of work on the boat. At what point were you able to shift into, okay, now I'm a sailor and an author? When did that start to become the thing?
That was a slow process as well, because I had already written and self-published 3 books. By 2019, I had already written and published 3 books. And now I had the boat and no house, and I was still writing, I was journaling. To write a sailing nonfiction, and the way I do it, I just journal a lot. Mm-hmm. You're already writing a log when you sail. You have to keep lots of notes in a log. So I just built on that concept and wrote more than the standard position, wind speed, weather, etc., and then journaled every day. So I was doing that already, and then got to the Bahamas that December, and I spent the winter there, and then I had to go back to Florida and haul the boat out and do another 8 months of work. So I did 2 months of work between October and December.
Okay.
And then I got to the Bahamas, but a lot of stuff was breaking on the boat.
Oh, no.
But I did it. I pulled off a season in the Bahamas, back to Florida, right as Florida was reopening from the pandemic, because the pandemic happened when I was in the Bahamas that first year. And then I spent 8 months roughly with the boat hauled out, living on her in a gravel parking lot of a marina in a boatyard, which is a rough life, living in a boat that's sitting up on blocks in a boatyard and working all day. But I did that. I worked on her all day and got her ready to go. And then it's funny you asked that question, like, when did you really transition? I used to repeat to myself sort of like a mantra, this is where I live now. I'd be in the Bahamas on the boat and feeling like I got to rush, do.
Yeah.
Like you do when you're on a 3-week vacation, or a week vacation. You got to run around and do a lot of stuff, and you're in the Bahamas, and there's 800 islands, and you got to just move. You got to go see a different one every day. Then I would say, no. This is where I live now. I don't need to rush. I can sit down and spend all day writing, or whatever. I can stay here. If I like this island, I can just stay here as long as I want. But it was a mindset that had to slowly develop. I haven't said that in a long time. This is where I live now, because I don't need to, because now I feel it like this is where I live. This is home. Now when I'm driving my dinghy back to my boat, I'm like, I'm going home. If I mention where I'm going, it's like I'm to somebody else. It's like, it's time to go home. This is home now.
Yeah.
So now I've fully made the transition, mentally. And at work, I put in 40-hour work weeks, Like in the beginning, I had money from having sold the house, and you feel like you're on vacation and you want to go spearfishing every day, surfing, snorkeling, you want to do stuff every day. Then now, this many years into it, 5 years into it, I guess, almost 5. Now I'm putting in 40 hours a week, unless there's surf, and then and then it's 4 hours a day. That's my quota during the surf season.
Gotcha.
But when there's not like prime time stuff to do, it's work, 40 hours, 8-hour days.
I love that you made that point about the mindset, because you were going through a lot. You got the boat, you left your life on land, essentially, and you started a new life. You had already kind of written out the rough draft of how you wanted it to be, and now you were living into it, and you were becoming that thing. But I think it's important to note you had to convince yourself a few times along the way that this is real. This isn't going to be like I've got to go back, or I'm going to get a call saying, hey, come back to work or something. You're not going to wake up from the dream. It almost sounds like. Then you wove that into your writing career as well, because you had already been writing, you'd already been sailing, you'd already been, doing all these things a little separately before they all came together. Mm-hmm. Then you had to just look at yourself and say, okay, this is what I am now. This is what I'm about. That makes me curious. Now that you've been doing that, those things have been merged. You've got that mindset of, this is where I live now. My home is my boat. 5 years on, is the adventure still everything you thought it would be?
It is. I have no desire to go back. In fact, my only fear is that this will somehow come to a crashing end and I'll have to go back and land. I love it out here. This is definitely the life that I was meant to live. I'm very happy out here on a boat. I've had this sense of freedom that's so hard to find living a typical life. I can go anywhere I want. I can pull up the anchor and move to a different anchorage anytime I want. If it's too loud here, I'll go somewhere else. Or if I just think, I just want to change the scenery, go somewhere else. I'm in Panama. Panama had a big strike last year where the roads were closed for a couple of months and you couldn't get gasoline and you couldn't get propane.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't countrywide, but in this place where I am now, Bocas del Toro, this whole area, this is where most of the sailors are. They couldn't get basic necessities. Well, I happened to be somewhere else at the time. But the thing is, if Panama, for instance, were to change all of a sudden and not be a good place to live anymore, I could just leave immediately, right away. I always keep the water tanks and the fuel tanks full. I always keep a couple of months' worth of food on board. I can literally pull up anchor and be gone and be in a different country in a couple of days. I can be in Colombia in a couple of days. If it's the right season, I can sail back to the Bahamas. You can go anywhere. Or if all of a sudden I think I want to sail around the world, or I want to go to Africa or the South Pacific, or anywhere, I could just go and do it. So I have a great sense of freedom now, and I'm also connected to nature. It gets dark and I see the darkness. And when the sun comes up, I wake up. I see the stars every night. I see sunrise and sunset every night. I hear birds. Every time I go outside, I hear different birds. I can jump in the water anytime I want. At night, I can look down. I have a light that shines straight down, and I can go out there and look down and see if the big barracuda's there or if the bats are flying by. There's fishing bats here,
Oh, wow.
These large bats swoop by the front of my boat every night and catch fish.
Wow.
There's just so many interesting things to see. I'm so connected to nature again. It's a really interesting life. It's very peaceful. It's great for a creative person like myself. There's no drama. I'm solo, writing every day. Not only do I write books, but I write short stories and I write poetry every day. Studying Spanish, reading great literature every day. Like what could be better?
Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it out here. And I'm writing novels now as well. I kind of came to realize I've written 5 sailing narratives, and I got to where I was thinking, I don't really want to keep pushing my luck and having these great adventures over and over again and writing about them. I want to write fiction as well.
Yeah.
Where I can be anywhere, where I can stay. If I want to stay in Panama for a year, which I have, that doesn't really lend itself to another sailing nonfiction. So I've written 3 novels now, 4 actually. I've published 3, and the 4th one's not quite done yet. So I'm doing that as well.
Now, is your latest novel Until They Bury Me?
That's the latest one that's been published,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, what was the inspiration for that one?
Life experiences, like all of us authors, we take our life experiences and fictionalize them, and push them, push limits. You take something and you magnify it.
Right.
You take a ex-girlfriend who was a little odd, and you magnify that and make her extremely odd. And you take your own personality traits and quirks and you magnify them and push it. What if I was really, this way?
Yeah.
What if I was way unbalanced in this direction? And what if she was way unbalanced in that direction? And what if we ran into each other after 20 years? And, what if I imagined her as the same person she was 20, 30 years ago? And here she is as an adult. That kind of happens. I know everybody who's run into an ex-girlfriend from a long time ago might remember all the good parts and pretend that they're still that same person and think, well, maybe we should try again. So that's what happens in the book. Guy runs into an ex-girlfriend from, his college sweetheart. He runs into her as an adult. They fall in love immediately, and they get married. They elope. And so here he is. He's from South Carolina, small town, and she's in a big city.
Yeah.
It's an unnamed city, but it's probably New York. Then he starts realizing she's really strange. She's got, who's this man she keeps drawing? She's an artist, and she's drawing pictures of the scene, the park or whatever. And there's always this one character in there, a man in a gray suit. He's always there in every drawing. And she's like, what do you mean? Why is he there? He's there, He comes to find she's schizophrenic, and she comes to find some things about him as well. And that's kind of the beginning of the book. The book spirals into complete madness, from there.
Oh, wow. All right. That sounds fascinating. I guess that solitude that you can have being the captain of your ship, so to speak, not so to speak, you're literally the captain of your boat. So that freedom to be where you want and have that focused creative time, what has that done for your writing over the last couple of books that you've written?
Oh, they keep getting better for sure. Writing is like any art. It's something that you can do for the rest of your life and slowly get better at it. And that's why I write poetry. One of the best things I've ever done for my writing is to write poetry. There's something about it. Poetry is like emotions translated into words with no filter or no filler. The shorter, the better, which is what music is. Music is emotions translated into something you hear. So writing poetry, writing short stories, those are things I do to practice the art in order to come up with better novels. I've finished a novel right now. It's in the editing process. I was in the Bahamas 2 winters ago, and I decided to pick up a sailing hitchhiker. A beautiful young woman who was traveling and just wanted to be on a boat. Somebody recommended. Somebody said, "Hey, here's a person who's going your way." So I thought, why not? I'll give it a try. I've been solo for a while. So I picked her up, and we sailed together. And my mother right away said, "Paul, I want you to send me a picture of you every day." And I thought, I wonder why she wants that. Like, she must be worried that this woman's making me miserable or something, wants to see that I'm happy. I don't know. So I mentioned that to my father, and he laughed and said, "Paul, your mother's worried she's going to kill you and steal your boat and then impersonate you with your texts. She wants to actually see you." Wow, what a story that would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So right away, that became my next novel, and that's exactly what happens. Early in the book, the captain of the boat is lost overboard, and the woman, the sailing hitchhiker he picked up, is riddled with guilt and can't face reality. And when she gets back to one of the islands and is back in phone service, gets a text from the guy's family, she's got to make the decision. Do I tell him what happened? And she doesn't want to because she feels like she's guilty. She's not really, but she's feeling guilty. And she decides to just answer, "Everything's fine," as if she were him.
Oh, wow.
So that starts the whole ball rolling of impersonation.
Wow.
And that book's called Identity Crisis. It's not published yet, but it will be soon. That's a lot of fun. I love being creative and writing stuff like that and coming up with stories. And
yeah, and you've made this your life now, which is so on point with what I love to talk with people about, because it really came down to, and tell me if I'm wrong, but for you, it came down to just making that choice that this is what you were going to do. And then after you did it, then this is what your life is now.
Absolutely. That's something that we all need to do. I think people don't spend nearly enough time, if any at all, thinking about what they really want to do with their lives. Most of us have this path laid out before us throughout our lives. We have to go to school, for instance. In America anyway, typical American life, you've got to go through high school. And then if your parents are wealthy, they're going to send you to college, and so you're going to go to college. And then what? Well, you're going to get a job, right? You're going to come out of college with a job, and you're going to need a car and a house or an apartment, a career. You got to have health insurance, right? You got to have a career. You got to have a 401k, a retirement plan. What are you going to do when you retire? And then at the same time, you're falling in love. You're young. You're falling in love with the first cute guy or girl you meet. And next thing you know, you got a family. Might as well have kids, right? Everybody else is having kids. Got to have kids. Especially if you're in love with a woman and she wants kids, what are you going to do? Tell her no? Like, no, we're not going to have kids.
No.
But anyway, most people don't even think, like, do I really want kids? You don't have to have kids. Don't have to. Don't have to get married if you don't want to get married. Don't have to have kids. Don't have to have a house and a car. Don't have to live in America. Don't have to have a career job. I don't have health insurance. I'm pretty healthy. I mean, I would if I could afford it. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But like, am I not going to chase my dream as a sailor so that I can have health insurance? Hell no. I risk my life every day. I risk my life just for fun, to spearfish. I'm not going to not chase my dream for anything.
Yeah.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is we should all spend a lot of time thinking about what really makes us happy and how we can maximize that, how we can design our lives. Here's the key phrase: design your life, especially when you're young. You need to design it. Don't let someone else design it. Don't let society design your life. Don't let television characters. Worst thing you can do is let television characters design your life for you. Design it yourself. It can be a whole lot of different things. There are very interesting people leading very interesting lives that are very unlike the typical American dream lifestyle. And here I am, one of them. It's fantastic out here. But I've never really had the typical life. I was the reggae musician, carpenter with a master's degree in biology. Like, nobody does that.
Right.
That was fun too. Don't get me wrong. That was a good time. I was chasing a dream there too. But once I realized, like, that's not going anywhere, we've hit as big as we're going to be. Time for something different. And I designed a new life.
I would imagine you changed as a person quite a bit at that point as well. I mean, you quit drinking before you quit the music business. So it was almost like some of those things were out of alignment with each other. So you were ready to move on. But I don't want to paint a picture like it's all been rainbows and sparkles. What are some of the most challenging things that have come out of this new lifestyle for you in the last 5 years?
Yeah, lots of challenges. Living on a boat is work, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, this says 80.
Okay.
That's what it is every day, That's That's why I got fans running.
Right.
I put this shirt on for the interview. I don't wear a shirt ever unless I'm going to town.
Gotcha.
I catch rain for rainwater. There's difficulties. Sailing is difficult. It can be uncomfortable. It can be dangerous. But I like all that stuff, so not a big deal. Not drinking is difficult. All of a sudden, your social life is back to zero, starting over. Don't even know what to do or who to meet or who to talk to because everybody you know is going to the bars, and drinking, and you like your whole social life is like gone when you quit drinking. You got to rebuild it. You got to expect that. You don't even know what to do. Like, what do you even freaking do on a Friday night or a Saturday night when you're sober? Like, you're like, what the?
Yeah.
What do I even do? Or read a book? It's like, that's what I do. Well, you know what I do? I go to bed early and I get up early and I walk out on the deck of my boat in the dark with the stars out, and I do yoga and I meditate. And then if there's waves, I jump in my dinghy and I drive to one of the point breaks and I surf, or I go spearfishing. Like, that's living. There's like real stuff to do.
Yeah.
Going to a bar is not like real stuff. That's a trap. That's an absolute freaking trap. Look at the people that are there every day and ask yourself if that's who you want to be.
Right.
They fell into that trap and they're all poisoning themselves every day, getting sick. But anyway, yeah, it's difficult to change everything because now everything is different and you have to learn so much new stuff, like how to spend your time, how to be happy. But as far as like sobriety, everything's better. Every single thing is better sober. If you're already sober and you're wanting to change your life, like if you have a strong desire to change your life, like it's going to be better once you do it, no doubt. The reason you want to change is because something's not right. If you're not happy in your life, change it. Take a risk. Risk everything. Why not? I believe that we live these lives over and over again. I kind of believe that the Buddhists are probably right and that we're reincarnated and we keep doing this life or some sort of life until we learned everything, until we've learned everything we're supposed to learn. If that's the case, you need to be doing different stuff. You need to be taking risks. And so what if you crash and burn? You tried, you're going to have a smile on your face because you're like, well, at least I tried, at least I didn't stay in that crappy life I didn't like. I tried to get out. Well, most likely you're going to get out and you're going to find something better. And then you're really going to be happy. I'm all about taking risks that are justified.
Yeah.
If the risk is justified, by all means, take it, Don't take risk at a freaking casino. That's stupid. Take risk of selling your house and buying a sailboat or an RV or moving to a different country or whatever, just like ditching all your friends. Like if you suddenly come to realize like everybody I hang out with is not the kind of person I want to be, then change it. Just walk away, move away or whatever, make new friends.
Because that's like betting on yourself. That's not betting on the odds at the casino. That's betting on you.
Bet on you, exactly. Invest in yourself. Yeah, bet on you. That's a good way to look at it.
So it sounds like, on a boat, you don't get your 10,000 steps a day.
No.
Unless you do a lot of pacing. But it sounds like also you go surfing, which is pretty great for your health. I heard you mention yoga out on the deck. What do you do to stay fit and, keep the body moving?
Got to go for long walks any way you can, first off, because that's the one thing you can't do on a boat. You're not standing on your legs supporting your body weight as often as you should. So I get out and hike. When I go to town for groceries, I go for long walks. But yeah, yoga every day for me because I'm over 50. I'm still trying to surf at a high level. You have to do yoga or something like it, or else you're just going to get injured doing that. And I surf, which is great upper body exercise. I spearfish. I free dive.
Okay.
So sometimes I'm out for 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
Free diving with a spear in my hand. That's pretty good exercise. And, sailing is, when you're actually sailing offshore, it's lots of exercise. Mm-hmm. The boat is constantly moving, so your body is constantly moving. Your core is like engaged all day. Unless you're laying down sleeping, your core is engaged, just keeping your body from falling over because the boat's moving.
Yeah.
Then when you're raising sails, trimming sails, that's a lot of work, especially when you're solo like myself. I sail solo and I have to do everything, So you have to think about staying in shape because you can't let your body get out of shape. Once it starts happening, it's hard to go backwards. If you're trying to surf, you're going to get hurt. I'm over 50. I'm surfing waves of consequence. I have a lot of friends that are doing it too. And, we're all in shape and the ones that aren't get injured. There's no getting around that. Yoga is great. It's stretching. Yoga is basically stretching. You're stretching every part of your body that you can to keep it limber so it doesn't get stiff.
Yeah.
So that when you get ragdolled underwater by a big wave, you can pop back up and keep doing it instead of tearing your shoulder or something, you know?
Well, man, this has been such a great conversation. If someone wants to go check out your books, check out what you do, what's the best way to connect with you?
I've got a website that's just my name, paultrammell.com, or you can look me up on Amazon, look up Paul Trammell on Amazon. You'll find all my books. But I've got links on the website.
I'll put your website up first in the show notes so everybody can go hit that and check out your latest book and the one that's coming out soon. That one sounds really cool too. Is there anything we didn't cover you want to talk about?
In parting, I would just say that you mentioned comfort zone earlier. You know, the first step is to get outside your comfort zone. If you want to design your own life, it's going to be a lot of stepping outside of your comfort zone. And that's a good thing. It's fun. It's fun to step outside your comfort zone, you know?
Yeah.
Get out there and do it. It's an adventure.
For some folks, I guess, some people I talk to, it sounds like they are really invested in their comfort zone, and it would take a really specific frame of mind for them to inch outside, and then they're like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad, and then they withdraw back into the safety of it.
Mm-hmm. Some people, maybe they've already got the perfect life and they don't want to change anything, you know? Not everybody's like me. Like my sister doesn't like change, you know?
Yeah.
She just straight up does not like change, but she's got the life that she wanted, so she doesn't need to change anything, I guess.
Yeah.
So everybody's different. But if stepping outside your comfort zone is a difficult thing for you, take baby steps. Tiny little step outside your comfort zone, and then the next day, take 2.
Right? That's what I wanted to really reinforce when we were working through your timeline and working through some of the things. You made some really big decisions, but you also, at the same time, did baby steps along the way.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just threw a stick of dynamite in your existing life. You put like little M80s along the way.
The only big stick of dynamite is the quitting drinking, because when you're an alcoholic, you can't take baby steps to quit drinking.
Right.
You have to do it. You have to quit and not ever drink again. You can't cut back. That's the big lie that, you know, if you think you can just cut back, you can't. If you have a problem drinking, you're not likely to be able to just cut back. I mean, it does happen. Some people can, but alcoholics can't. There's like a yes or no. Like you're either the kind of person that can control your drinking or you can't. And we all kind of know who we are. And if you got to quit, you got to throw the stick of dynamite and just quit. Make it happen. However you can do it. You know, I pulled it off without going to meetings or rehab. But if you got to go to rehab, go to rehab. If you got to go to meetings, go to meetings. If you got to move out of your town, move out of your town, because the life of an alcoholic sucks. You know, you're not having fun anymore. It's just like alcohol is like cigarettes. Like the first one is kind of cool. You catch a little buzz. Next thing you know, you're smoking a pack a day, because if you don't smoke, you're sick. You're not getting a buzz anymore. Same with alcohol, same with weed, same with any addictive drug. You eventually just do it because you have to, because otherwise you will be sick. And now your life is you're sick, and then you do your drug and you're not sick anymore. And then you get sick again in the morning, wake up sick. You know, a hangover is withdrawal. How about that? That's why withdrawal gets worse, is the longer you drink. That's why hangovers get worse the longer you drink, because now it's not just a hangover, it's withdrawal. You haven't had a drink in 8 hours. You're going through withdrawal already. So you have a drink in the morning and you feel better. That was a wake-up call to me when I realized that. It's like, holy shit, hangovers, it's withdrawal. You know, you're addicted, and now you're withdrawal, and you got to have a drink in the morning. That's bad. If you're doing that, man, you got to quit.
Right.
You got to quit, or you're going to die. You're going to die a long, slow death.
Man, this has been such a wide-ranging conversation. I love that you have all of these different topics. We go from the getting sober to the maximum adventure and designing your life. And it's been a blast just talking about all of these things. And I really want to thank you for sharing, being vulnerable, and giving us some inspiration and also a big dose of perspective.
Well, thanks for having me on. I love talking about all this stuff, and I hope that it helps somebody design a better life for themselves.
Thanks for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this content and are thinking about ways to share your story or even get more joy out of your life, I have a free ebook that I'd love to share with you. It's called Plotting Your Joyful Rebellion, and I designed it to be a 5-step field guide full of guerrilla warfare tactics to help prepare you to overthrow any of the parts of your life you feel the call to rebel against. Go to ajoyfulrebellion.com and click on the link right there at the top to claim your free copy of the book. Again, that's ajoyfulrebellion.com, or simply hit the link at the top of the show notes. What sort of rebellion are you plotting right now? I'd love to hear about it. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or through the website at ajoyfulrebellion.com. Thanks again for listening today, and be sure to stop by next week for another episode full of joyful rebellion.